Let's all work together. Let's trade. Let's be friends. No more wars. Pink and fluffy, hugging kisses. Is you need to consolidate your finances and your debt.
Yeah.
Because times are going to get hard. Trade wars are starting. Society fracturing, which is already doing. He's talking about tribalism, which is already doing. He's talking about drawing lines along ethnic lines. All these things are already happening.
Well, I can't believe it seems like such a long time we've spoken, but I can't believe also that the rate at which things are sort of progressing, not necessarily in the right direction. So I think it's really good opportunity for you and I to take stock of how do we see the problem and what should people do about it? Because I think it's, from my point of view, I'm taking certain actions which proactively to protect my situation. So I thought it'd be really interesting to get your view on that. So over to you, my friend. If you sort of do your monologue, then I'll sort of compare notes and do a monologue, and at the end we'll sort of try and wrap it up somehow.
Yeah. Well, first of all, great to see you again. It's been several months since we've had the chat. I still love your backgrounds, by the way. So what do people need to be preparing for now over the next 6 months? I think the world is changing. I think we all know the world's changing. I think the post-World War II order is coming to an end. I think it's not going to be over very soon, but we're at the beginning of the end of the post-World War era. And that's the globalist era. That's let's all work together. Let's trade. Let's be friends. No more wars. Pink and fluffy, hugging kisses. And we can live in a utopia. And that worked for many, many decades in the West. But nationalism, human instinct is coming to the fore now, and we're competing with each other, and we're going back to tribalism. And I'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
For individuals, what would I be recommending individuals do at the moment over the next 6 months? Well, the first thing I would do, and I'm doing, is you need to consolidate your finances and your debt.
Yeah.
Because times are going to get hard. Trade wars are starting. Our economy is almost bankrupt. We could go into recession so we're probably in recession as we speak.
Yeah.
Benefits are being caught. We can't borrow any more money like we used to. We're in a bad situation in this country, and we've got lots of personal debt. So if I'm out there listening to that, what I would do now is I would look at my financial situation. Yeah. I would cut what I don't need to spend. I'd start paying off as much debt as possible. I'd be looking, at different investments if you've got, depending what situation you're in, but finances are number one because it's going to get tough over the next few years.
Yeah.
So definitely do that. Next thing I would be looking at is I would start thinking about violence. Violence is coming. I did a podcast last month with a professor of war studies at King's College London, Professor David Betts.
Yeah, I listened to that. It's very good.
Yeah. So you listen to it. He's saying a civil war in this country next 5 years. Yeah. What it doesn't mean is like the old English Civil War with the Cavaliers and the Roundheads and armies and battles. He's talking about Northern Ireland troubles. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about society fracturing, which is already doing. He's talking about tribalism, which is already doing. He's talking about drawing lines along ethnic lines. All these things are already happening.
Yeah.
We just haven't hit the violence part yet. And that's going to... We had a little bit of it last summer in Southport, but the government came down on that hard and fast and managed to keep a lid on it. The next atrocity, and an atrocity is always coming down the line in this country and in Europe. We've got stabbings and murders in Europe, every week.
Yeah.
One's going to happen in the UK again. And I'm not sure the government will be able to keep the lid on the violence this time.
No.
I think there'll be.
I think they're fueling or something.
Well, and that's what this professor was talking about. He was saying the government at the moment is trying to keep a lid on things by using the tactics they know, but he's saying the tactics they know and they're using is actually contributing to the future violence.
Yeah.
It's just kicking the can down the road, and the can's getting bigger and bigger every time they kick it down the road.
Yeah.
So you need to be looking at where you live, your house security, what you're going to do if the cities, start turning in. I'm not talking about a single riot. I'm talking about mass violence. I'm talking about bombs going off, people being shot, people being stabbed. So, some white kids might start a craze of ripping hijabs off of Muslim women. So the Muslim community respond by stabbing some white lads.
Yeah, it doesn't take much like that. One instance is it's
Exactly.
like Nick Lowell's making that false accusation about similar situation. Terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. And then somebody then gets a gun and shoots someone. So then someone plants a bomb in a house of worship. Then somebody gets a machine gun. It can ratchet up very quickly.
Yeah.
So people need to be aware of that. And then if you rely on the state for your part of your income or all your income, or you rely on the state for your business, you need to start looking at, can you survive without the state?
Yeah.
Because the state's not going anywhere, but benefit cuts have already started. Huge cuts will be coming over the next few years. Welfare is going to be cut. Government contracts will start diminishing because they won't have the money to put contracts out.
Yeah.
The whole way we do business in this country and our whole economy will be changing. So people need to be aware of that. So if you're sat on your backside now and all your money comes from universal credit or disability benefits, you need to be you need to be thinking, I need to get a job. And
totally, yeah.
Plenty of jobs out there. But those are the big things that I think are coming down the line. And Trump started it yesterday with tariffs.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. And so from your personal perspective, if you look at there's a sort of social relationship side of this and division. If you just look around yourself, Nick, and the relationships you've had, let's say over the last, 6 to 12 months, or maybe a bit before, how have because there's something about our well-being and connection, like you and I are speaking, isn't there? And something about that. How do you see your relationships? How are you preserving your relationships around you to keep you sane and keep you psychologically in a good place?
That's always been quite easy for me because I'm a little bit of a loner. I don't need company. I have friends. I have company, of course.
Yeah.
But I don't crave that. I don't need that.
No. Okay.
I spend my working day locked in my office in my house, and I don't want my wife coming in. I don't need company. I'm very focused, so I don't need that. But people have been struggling since COVID. I mean, this is just a continuation of the failing society we live in since COVID. COVID did a lot of damage. The history books will write about the psychological community damage it did over the long term. Many young people will never recover from those 2 years. But what I have noticed and what is really scary, and I've noticed this now over 5 years, but it's increasing every year, and that's English nationalism. And I don't mean the far right, and I don't mean Nazis. I mean everyday English people are turning around now and saying, what about us? What about the English? No one ever talks about the English. We talk about the Scots and the Welsh and the Northern Irish. We talk about the French. And we talk about people from Uganda and Bali and Kathmandu. And we care about them and we care about their rights. We want a better life for them and a better deal for them. But the only people we never talk about, and the only people who never get a voice to talk about themselves, are the English. And you can see it online. You can see the people.
It's absolutely intentional, isn't it?
Oh yeah. This has been going on. I'm writing a book that's going to talk about this at the moment. This has been going on for a long time. 150 years. It's something that Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli mentions. George Orwell mentions. This isn't a new thing. This isn't about mass immigration. They're just symptoms of a type of English self-hate. And I'm coming to the conclusion that this self-hate really comes from an embarrassment that we're the best race ever to exist. So I think the pink and fluffy go, look at the English, look what we've achieved, look what, we've created the modern world, look at the medicines, the inventions, everything we've done, and look at everybody else. I feel sorry for everybody else. Do you know what? I'm going to lower my standards. I'm going to lower how I feel to make them feel better. We do it all the time with disabled people.
Yeah.
We look at the Paralympics and we go, "Oh, amazing! They're amazing." No, they're not amazing. If we're amazing, it'd be in the proper Olympics. We do it with women's sports. Women's sports, fantastic. No, they're not.
This is it's the psychology of victimhood, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It makes us feel better because we feel pity for other people, and that's what this self-hate of the English is. It's about self-pity and pitying other people that you're not as good as us.
It's absolutely destructive. So can I just ask, I quite enjoyed your Mayor and I thing. What happened to that? Is that, if you don't mind me asking, why is that stopped?
It stopped because we just couldn't coordinate our diaries anymore. It was as simple as that. I'm actually looking for a co-host now to bring back the Mayor and I.
All right. Well, a young female like me to block her. I've got a wig, Nick. So no. Yeah.
The issue is it needs to be someone local. It needs someone who can commit to the time. It has to be face to face. That's what gave the podcast that extra spark.
It's that closeness. It's that intimacy, isn't it?
Exactly. So it's a shame. It really started taking off. Each episode now was getting thousands of views.
I know.
And there were long episodes, like an hour and a half, and getting 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 views.
I think what was interesting about the pair of you, you both cared about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it was pragmatic. It was, not particularly scripted, but just about right. So I think it's that sort of honesty and that we need to get back to, isn't it? That authenticity.
Yeah, we tried to base it on a conversation in the pub. So we just turned up at a pub.
Yeah.
I've got no idea what we're talking about until Lindsay turned up.
Oh, does he? All right, okay. So
I'd have no idea. I would have a quick look at his notes 3 seconds before we start, because sometimes I'd go, I've not heard of that.
No.
And I'd have to quickly, right, it's about, right, I get that now. But that's as much prep as I did, was 3 seconds before.
Yeah.
And then we'd have an honest conversation and we'd disagree or we would agree. Or I would tell him, he was wrong, or he'd tell me that, I've not woken up yet. It was a conversation in the pub, and I think that's what people liked about it.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. So, I mean, what I'd contribute, one thing I've learned probably since we last talked, I can't believe how quickly things have moved and not in the right direction. I'm effectively not talking so much about the symptoms and the outcomes, but more about the psychology, because that's about what's driving it. So I mentioned victimhood. There's various sort of common denominators here. I think and I've also been looking at, getting involved in politics to try and sort this out as well. So I've been pretty directly involved. And I think when you look at what's going on, it's absolutely intentional. And the most disturbing thing is that 44% of people, don't vote. And in fact, I think that number is probably increasing, because if you take the Reform Party, that's disintegrating. And actually, I did a podcast on that this morning. Because I like to sort of collect my own thoughts and sort of just challenge myself to see if I can think something through. But I think what you've got is you've got people who actually making emotional decisions. So people are sort of hoping that reform will be better without much evidence. And that's the problem. It's the same with Marxism. It's the same with Stalmerism. It's based on a load of Marxist lies and emotion, which makes it very difficult to address. And when you do address it, and Islam's the same, actually, because Islam tragically is also based on victimhood, like Marxism. And Islam only became popular when Muhammad felt persecuted and he turned into a victim, and everybody jumped on board and it became popular, which is the reason why you've got two different halves of the the books of Islam, where it's switched, and then you've got that strange sequential thing where it's all mixed up in different areas. So, but it's really quite disturbing, because in times of uncertainty, people will latch on to this sort of nonsense. And Starmer, whilst he talks utter rubbish, because he talks negative generalizations and he makes statements around, Putin parallels with Hitler, which is very, very dangerous and totally, totally baseless. Particularly when you're dealing with such a powerful leader and such such a powerful fighting force. I mean, Russians never lose a war. I mean, they won the Second World War. They lost 20 million soldiers in the last war, and they've already got 800,000 soldiers ready to go. So you don't want to poke that bear. And this recklessness that sits behind this ideology, which is seriously concerning, Nick. So now we've you and I have both witnessed this sort of escalation of persecution, which has ratcheted up, which started off by releasing, the migrants into the community, changing the law to allow terrorists to be in the community, then attacks on farmers, which is all around the psychology of own nothing, be happy, and vengefulness, as if the farmers are wealthy, which they're bloody well not. They're asset rich, but they're poor as hell. And I've written a business plan for a farm, and it's impossible to make money. And I know how to make money. You have to run it like the most precise. When you see a shed, with cows in it, you can have in pens. You've got to feed them exactly the right amount of food. Otherwise, you make no money at all. It's a real science. And so, there's this and then you've got this attack on pensioners, which is around the true Brits, because the pensioners are the true Brits. They're people who've come up through post-war generation who know what British is like. And I'm on the tail end of that, and you're sort of similar sort of age, you and I. So we know what true Brit was like. We know what, and we've seen the good and bad. We've seen Thatcherism and all this stuff, but we know what it is to be British, whatever that is. So I think the thing that concerns me most about this is that, particularly with the incoming Trump presidency, that's such a massive threat to expose these lies on a global stage, that is really rattling the cages of the Marxists like Starmer, which will put them in a situation where they'll literally do anything to protect themselves. For example, to start a war in Ukraine. And I was thinking around the psychology of the war in Ukraine, and I pick up this psychology when people are talking, sort of different snippets of information. And one of the most disturbing things in terms of controlling the population is this notion of be happy and own nothing, which is the proletariat, which is the worker, which people don't understand what the worker is, but it's this person who's just like an automaton, no control. And how do you do that? You basically trash the middle class. So this effort, the Ukraine war, Ursula von der Leyen said that they were going to attack people. They were going to fund this using people's savings and pensions, right? And that is it's like the final straw of ripping, the wealth out of the nation to get absolute control. And so, and the other disturbing thing about this is that, you can see the way Starmer behaves in his cabinet, almost shamelessly, lying on their CVs and, Starmer's freebies. And that's still continuing, even up to recently. There've been examples of, I mean, they're such insignificant, uninteresting people, but, that trip to Kenya, she was looking for some free, but just endless nonsense.
Yeah.
Because these people really do think they're above the law. So I think, this situation is, in my view, badly misunderstood because people are looking at the outcomes. It's absolutely intentional. I think there's also a spiritual side to this as well, because the Bible says if you start doing the wrong things, the devil gets a hold of it. Right. And I think it's so important that the actions that you and I take on a daily basis are the right actions, and they're uncompromising, because you can see what's happening with Farage. He sticks his head above the parapet. He hasn't got the backbone, and he gets shot down, and it becomes very bland. And we really do need to get to a stage whereby the strong people are standing up, and the infants take a back seat. But I mean, you mentioned the level of violence. I remember actually a lot of this stuff. I remember an instance which was part of what I talked about in one of my books, which was around social media, where the way that fuels violence. And I think we've got several layers on top of this, but there was an incident which led tragically to the killing of someone in King's Cross Station, which was all about losing face. This poor little chap sent something out on social media which was misunderstood. All of a sudden, it sort of expanded. And then this bloke was met and stabbed in King's Cross Station and killed. And I think we've got that type of victimhood, type losing face type situation on such a massive scale. And I think as well, we shouldn't underestimate, because The only defense that Marxists and liars have got against this is to silence people and lock them up. So you look at the really extreme people who really are standing out against this stuff. They're in prison, and they might not be the most articulate people in the world, but actually to get angry about something, you've got to care. And these are inarticulate. And who's articulate when they're angry, and so these, and the Tommy Robinson situation, being in prison, is absolutely disgraceful, the way he's been treated. So we're in a really pretty awful situation. And one of the things I noticed when I was looking at the damage that silencing people did, my first book's called Evil of Silence, because it's effectively, if you are silenced, Nick, and you're not allowed to speak, you don't feel free to speak, it's actually suicide of you, because you are nothing else. Without your brain and what comes out of your mouth and your interaction, there is nothing else to a human being, really. And again, the Bible talks about words and speaking a lot. What comes out of your mouth is so important. So I think we are in a really terrible situation. And
we are, and I think it's going to get worse before it gets better.
Just bear with me for a minute. I think some of the things that are taking place are very destructive. So the environmental stuff has been abdicated to the EU. The military's been abdicated to the EU. It's been handed off, but the Starmer can't stand accountability. Because accountability and truth are real killers. But this is going to lead to the demise of the economy, which is fragile in the first place. Because the one thing that has kept the sort of Western economies civilized for the last 40 years has been cheap energy costs. And now what we've got, we haven't even got cheap energy costs. We've got volatile energy costs. There was one situation in London not so long ago where the normal price for energy is something like £120 a gigawatt, and it went up to £9,000 a gigawatt in London to stop it stopping for a short period of time. And this is not normal economics. We're talking about absolute shortages, and the same with farming. The farmers currently are, I think they're withdrawing wheat or something from the market to stop bread production, which I fully support, because we've got to revolt. So I think this really is extraordinary. And the problem as well, my third or fourth book, which is sort of short little ditties really, was prior to my last one, was called The Revolt. And the reason why is because if you don't revolt, it's much harder to fix these things retrospectively. It's much easier to stop things from happening. And what we're actually doing, and this is one of my concerns, is to actually do something useful. Because whilst you and I are communicating with each other, and I appreciate this, it's important to compare notes. It's important that the rubber hits the road, Nick. So we get out of our sheds and we get out of our offices. And this is the reason why I'm directly involved in politics. I'm directly involved in protecting my own personal situation and my family. I've got 3 women in my household who really matter to me, and I'm seriously concerned about that. But I think it's as well, that we do take action to prevent these things from happening practically. Politics is part of that, but it's not the only part of it.
I agree. Going back to the Ukraine thing, the elite at the moment, so the people who are running the Western world and have been now since Second World War, will not go without a fight.
Right.
They will not relinquish power, their influence, because everything has been set up to benefit them. They will not go without a fight. Hence why we're getting more and more authoritarian laws. The state, that's why the police now are turning into some sort of semi-paramilitary force. Because it's the only way for them to keep power. Big change is coming. And like I said, it'll get worse before it gets better. Foreign wars, I'm not too sure about foreign wars. I can't foresee any. I can foresee fake foreign wars, such as Ukraine, such as demonizing Russia, because dictators always want to point to someone else and go, I'm protecting you from them. And we've always used Russia as that, the red enemy. Look at that.
It's a scapegoat, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, Russia can't even defeat Ukraine.
No.
So I'm not worried about Russia marching through Europe. They can't even beat Ukraine.
What are they going to get? A load of woke idiots anyway. I mean, they're not exactly going to do that, are they?
No,
Putin's
yeah,
a smart guy.
yeah. Exactly, and they played the long game.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have gone into Ukraine if Trump would have been in power. He only went in because of Biden, saying with the disastrous pullout of Afghanistan.
Yeah.
People saw weakness and knew America didn't have a backbone, so said we can do what we want. But it's changed again now.
Yeah.
But there will be, there will be. The only one we need to worry about is China.
Yeah.
China is building and building. China wants to be a world power. China, had a century of humiliation when we ruled large parts of China. They were humiliated. We sold them drugs, and we fought the opium wars because we were just selling them drugs all the time. We were the original drug dealers.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're a threat, but
they don't forget that either, do they?
no, they played a long game. They played a long game, and they're very clever people.
Yeah.
But I think China will disintegrate. If we play the game right, China will disintegrate into many, many different countries, just like Europe is. China's too big, too ethnically diverse, different religions, different cultures. We think they're all the same, but they're not. They're as different as Europe are. But I think and they've got a history of civil wars, so I think they'll disintegrate the richer they get. So that might save us from a world war with China. But if we do have a war, it'll be with China. Anyone else isn't big enough.
I would say that similar with China, the psychology that someone like Xi he's another massive liar, and so if he felt sufficiently threatened, I think he'd attack. I think he'd start a war as opposed to let it fall to pieces.
Oh, absolutely. But it's that dictator syndrome. Yeah. I need to have an external enemy because it stops my people turning on me. Yeah. So I'm sure if he can see it all crumbling and it's all falling down and he's not got long to go, he'll start a war somewhere and he'll rally the people behind nationalism and fighting for the country. Yeah. Whether or not that saves them or not, I don't know. It depends if they're ready for that war.
Yeah.
But what other things can go wrong with to stop the elite? I think the big thing at the moment will be the next atrocity in this country. Will Starmer and Starmer's government be able to stop the on-street violence that will start? People will be more prepared this time to be arrested, to go to jail. They'll be sneakier. They won't be as obvious because they know the police are going to come down on them. And that's what I fear. I fear mass civil unrest in this country.
Yeah. There's one, if you think back, do you remember the last Davos thing? What was the one thing that struck you out of that whole thing? What was the one bit of psychology that came out of that? What was it?
That many world leaders didn't attend. So I think the WAF, Davos, are collapsing. I've never really seen him as a threat. I always thought it was an easy thing to point to and say, look, they're trying to rule the world. Well, if they're trying to rule the world, they won't be having these open meetings. They've got an agenda and they want to rule the world, but everybody wants to rule the world. I just think the WF is over.
Yeah, no, that's interesting you say that. It's quite positive. I think the striking bit of psychology that came out of, which is related to what you just said, is they talked about the battle for misinformation, which is absolutely protecting their lies and their bullshit. So I think that, which is linked to your thing, was they're falling, and that the level of violence that they're willing to go to protect themselves, I think, is escalating. So I think the things for me, I totally agree, which is protecting yourself against violence. I think this government will fail for one of two reasons: civil unrest, or well, three reasons actually. Civil unrest. The Labour Party, I think, will implode at some stage because they'll stop voting for these absolutely mad situations, although they're circumventing Parliament. But there's a point at which they're the punishment of the people, because not everybody's bad. I mean, the Labour Party have relatively good roots, but they're not going to vote for this stuff. They're not going to vote for the Ukraine war. Maybe they will. There's a problem with indoctrination, but there are some things they won't vote for. So there may be a rebellion, because I can't think of anything worse than working for Starmer. Can you imagine that? It'd just be appalling. And the third thing I think is economic collapse, which is inevitable. So I think, and an economic collapse actually isn't rational. It's far more, economics is far more psychological than it is rational. But once investors lose confidence in the UK, that's when things collapse, and it's not really. And then at that point, then people take the money out. Then you've got so I think we've got to. And what am I doing about that? I'm downsizing. I'm moving somewhere else. I'm doing a whole raft of things practically, as well as securing income as well. So there's a number of things I'm doing to cut my costs to basically mean that I can live on fresh air. I think the other thing I'm doing, which is working closely with political situations, so I'm quite closely involved in the part two reform thing, because I think that's shot to pieces, and it's important that this weirdly enough plays to my strengths, because the psychology of what's a core business, what can you fix, what can't you fix, how bad a mess it is. It's very clear to me that it's important you don't fix reform, because it's a psychological mess, and even if you try to, it's so nasty and there's so little value in it, it's going to come back and kill you. So you need to basically set out your stall, in my view, with a new leader, new structure, new unification to get all the things right. Because I think that's very important from a people's sanity perspective, because there are things that are happening in the country that they have no control over, Nick, but they need to feel as though someone's acting in their interests. You mentioned about, no one being interested in English people. That's, I think, very important for people's well-being. But I think the other nasty challenge is that you mentioned work. I think there's also there's also, I don't know if Gary Stevenson. Do you know Gary Stevenson?
No.
He's really interesting, because one of the things that is in one of my books is something called economic rent, which is a bit of a weird concept, but it basically means it's part of the have nothing, be happy thing. But with the mega wealthy, buying up assets, BlackRock, for example, have bought up 50,000 houses in the UK. Problem with that is they control assets and they control asset prices. So it's like we're like puppets on a string. And so, and then with all of these other things that are going on, things become less affordable. So people will be moved out of their homes. They won't be able to afford to own a house, and they won't be able to afford to pay the mortgage and all this stuff. So this puts people in a horrible reliant situation in relation to these globalists. And what Gary Stevenson says is that, and I agree with the logic, because it's the antithesis to economic rent. You need to tax. These are not the moderate. They're not multimillionaires. These are the billionaire nutters.
Yeah.
Who actually pay 30. Well, they should pay 30% of the global taxation, massive amount, and that money should be given back to free up the people at the bottom, so that they can do their own thing, which is the antithesis of victimhood. It's mobilizing those people at the bottom and liberating them and letting them off the lead. Because the big problem with socialism is you can't micromanage you and me. You and me, how do we make money? No bugger's going to be able to tell us how to do that. And this is the reason why Marxism collapsed, because you just cannot. It's important that we feel free to make money, and there's nothing stopping us. And free speech is what keeps us all sort of on the right track and sane. So I think they're the things that I'm doing practically, but it still frustrates the hell out of me that I'm not doing more. And I'm also launching something as well with relatively high profile around company turnaround to effectively create a platform to preempt and create business structures that don't go bust. So that it's effectively, if you look at your financial structure, Nick, the way your mortgage is and whatever, your income, now how robust is that? How much can that take in terms of resilience? How resilient is that? How little income can you operate on? That's and this is the sort of logic I operate at a business level when I'm doing company turnaround. I look at the business model. Very often you can have excessive pension schemes, being a major threat. And so you can restructure this to get the structure right, to make sure it's resilient to go through the battle. So that's the other thing I'm doing. But again, that's still a bit bloody hands off. I really, and I listen to loads of people, and I think there's a real problem in reform as well. And Ben Habib's a fantastic orator, but actually talking is not bloody enough. And everyone's talking. It's interesting, the psychology of, what even Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib are saying, that we have to wait till 2029. That the 1930s Germans sort of did nothing, and look what they got. So I think, if we are talking about an escalating threat, we don't want to sit around and do nothing about it. We should be doing something practically beyond talking about it to prevent this stuff happening, because this is going to affect our loved ones, Nick, and our well-being, and it's a severe threat to, effectively. And the other bloody thing with this, it was an endless list of nasty outcomes. If the economy collapses, then there's going to be a whole lot of homelessness in the people who are hardworking, paying taxes, can't afford to pay their mortgages. And there's going to be an awful lot of disgruntled, entitled migrants who are not getting their chicken and chips every Thursday morning. And that is not going to end well. So we do face a very real, very important threat. And some of the issues I looked at, I'm compiling this A-team list of how the hell do you sort this stuff out, politically. But, one is you need to stick to your plan. You don't get blown off course. So it requires an unusual quantity of resilience. And I looked at the best numbers to get rid of the illegal migrants out of the country. It require 175,000 soldiers, roughly. It's the best estimate I've got. So that is an interesting challenge, to mobilise, reserves, goodness knows who else, to actually embark on that exercise. So these are no small, these are the sorts of things. I've got a list of about 15 things like that. There's a civil services shot to pieces. It's ridiculous crap with shampoo recently, Shamood, with a recent, blame the Brits thing, which is deadly. You've got all that stuff in the civil service which needs to be sorted out, because if you let things just happen, it always goes left, further and further left. The people become more and more entitled and less, accountable. So, I think it's important. We really do. I feel frustrated because I'm really bloody pushing it, but I feel like there's more I can do on the rubber hitting the road, scenarios.
Yeah.
Do you understand what I mean?
I do, but everyone needs to ask themselves that question. Everyone needs to be asking, what am I doing to fix this country?
Yeah.
Now, not everyone can do what me and you do. Not everyone can set a political party. Not everyone can hold demonstrations. But there's things that everybody can do, and they need to work out themselves what can they do to save this country and to push the right agenda along.
Yeah.
I'm sick and tired of talking about it. So I made a decision a couple of months ago. So I actually joined Reform UK.
Yeah. As well, yeah.
Yeah. So I joined, not because they're perfect, because they're not perfect.
Yeah.
But because at the moment, who else are we going to vote for?
Yeah.
Now, I keep telling people now, treat political parties like buses. Have a look at the front of the bus and see the destination. And if it's a destination you want to go to, get on that bus.
Yeah.
As soon as it takes the wrong turn, get off the bus and wait for another bus to come, or maybe you have to get a taxi, or you have to walk the rest of the way.
Yeah.
But at the moment, Reform are offering things that no other party are offering.
Yeah.
All we can do is believe in that, give them a chance. And if they let us down, then we vote them out. But even if they're only slightly better than Labour and the Tories, well, I'll always vote for slightly better than slightly worse.
Yeah.
And maybe if we can get them on the levers of power, then maybe the Tories and Labour will go, right, we need to get back into power. We need to do more of the things they're doing. And it's that nudge effect.
Yeah, okay.
I've met that many politicians, from local councillors up to prime ministers.
Yeah.
They only care about one thing, and that's to be re-elected.
Yeah.
And if they know the way to get re-elected is to embrace these policies, whatever those policies are, they will embrace those policies. So many politicians will say, here are my policies. If you don't like them, I've got some more policies you might like. They don't.
Yeah.
Most politicians don't even care about their policies. It's all about being voted in again.
Yeah.
MPs are on something like £95,000 a year. That's a lot of money.
It is, yeah.
No, they're not going to give that up lightly. They will swap sides. They will change their views and their opinions to keep in power. And I think Reform at the moment are the ones who are doing that nudge, who are doing that pushing. I'm hoping to stand for Reform in the next general election.
Oh, good.
And my aim is, if I am elected, suddenly I've got a bigger voice. Suddenly, I might be able
Yeah.
to get my hands on some levers of power somewhere. I mean, look at
Yeah.
the great work Rupert Lowe did, exposing things and using parliamentary privilege to get data of civil service and then telling us all about these things.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm sort of moving to now, because podcasts are great, discussing it and having these conversations are great, and it might inspire other people, which is well worth doing. But I want to get my hands on some levers of power. I've got decades of experience
I know
solving social issues. There's a lot I can offer government.
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, you've got the backbone from somewhere, and you've also got the integrity to not to be bent out of shape, and that's so important. The tragedy is, I think the tragedy is though that I mean, I'm pretty close to formed. I get, I'm in daily contact with the whole bloody shit show, frankly. And sadly, when I look at the trajectory of the organisation, it's shot. But I very much like your metaphor of the bus. I think that's very good. I think as well, there's a Christian. I've come back to my the reason why I'm not a Christian because of flimmy flammy stuff. I'm a Christian because it works, Nick. And I've noticed even the most ridiculous situations it works, and it gives a backbone. And one of the things that the Bible says is, and I think this actually is the solution to what we're talking about. So, because actually the way these things change is by everybody not getting bent out of shape and doing the right thing, right? And everybody has a conscience, right? Everybody, when they walk out the door, has a choice to either feed the beggar or not feed the beggar, or feed the dog, not whatever these decisions. And actually, if we all, and also to speak up and speak the truth, so and be fearless. And I think one of the positive things I've come across, and I tried to lead on this, Nick, I tend to make myself a bit of a. You notice on social media, I make myself, I step over the edge to encourage people to drag people along with me. So I'm willing to sacrifice myself to do that, because I've got that level of courage, and I think you have in a different. You do that in your own way, and I think I've noticed that there are more people speaking up, and I think Trump is going to be a great support to provide that safety net for people to speak up. And if everybody speaks up and everybody takes the right actions, because we are fundamentally a Christian country, and we have got that bedrock of, and the things that really matter in Christianity are the notion of love, right? Which is the notion of putting other people first. The notion of forgiveness, Nick, you know, because Jesus is the master of forgiveness. It's the notion of having God first, because if you don't love God, what do you love? There's a whole raft of stuff for blokes that are not good for us that we will love if we haven't got that anchor. So there's some really simple things that really make sense. And I've noticed in the most really terrible turnaround situations, these things hold water. So when I give talks on company turnaround in disastrous situations where people are losing their houses, their livelihoods, goodness knows what else, grace and love hold strong. Love, the Bible says, love is the only thing you cannot destroy, Nick. Right? And you think about the love you have for your family, your kids, that will never. It's indestructible. So if you stay on that message of love, then you're in a good place. And whereas the flip side, you know, if you look at Islam, what do they stay on? They flip from being persecuted to violence, and you know that's their ideology. And this, you know, central victimhood, which is absolutely the sickest, violent psychology, same as Marxism. So we've got this, and that's why Christianity is resilient. But the other thing about Christianity is it gets to a point whereby people say, I've had enough of this. And the interesting thing about Christians is they then got the strength, right, to sort it out regardless. And they will, you know, we're great fighters. We are a very strong nation. So do not underestimate us. And frankly, you know, anybody else that thinks they can take us on are deluded. So we should be quietly very strong. But if you think about it, if we speak the truth, we're going to encourage each other, Nick, rather than this half-baked conversation. We're going to strengthen each other. We're going to fortify each other. We're going to demonstrate that it works. And the financial side of this, again, when you come back to immigration stuff, it just doesn't work financially. And so that is where and Christianity does, but Christianity is about freedom and entrepreneurialism and all that sort of stuff. So I think there are some really simple things we can do, which is just do the right thing as best you can.
And that's the way everyone should be living their lives. Because if you do the wrong thing for the right reasons, it's still the wrong thing to do.
Yeah,
If you overlook a little bit of evil, then the next day you'll overlook a little bit more evil and a little bit
100%.
more and slightly bigger evil.
Yeah,
Or, you see someone shoplifting, well, that's okay. Well, tomorrow you may not care that somebody's stealing a car or killing someone.
absolutely.
You either moral or you're not moral. You either follow the law or you don't follow the law.
Yeah.
And that's how we need to live our lives. We need to live our lives for us, our morality. Somebody was telling me the other day, they were in a shop and paying by cash, and the cashier gave him £1 extra by mistake.
Yeah.
And this person I was talking to said, "Oh no, sorry, love, you've given me £1 too much," and gave it back, and said she was shocked. She was absolutely shocked, and said she was shocked that you're giving me £1 back because I made a mistake.
Yeah.
And he went, "Well, yeah, you made a mistake, and I don't want to benefit from your mistake because you might have to put that £1 in yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm an honest person, and we all make mistakes, and we shouldn't be penalised for making honest mistakes because none of us are perfect."
No.
She was absolutely flabbergasted, but that's how we used to be. That's how everybody, not everybody, there's always been crooks, but many people used to be.
Yeah, and that actually, I mean, even you sharing that story is quite motivating, isn't it? Because it's actually, and that's what changes. It's this setting that example. And the other thing is, it's important to recognise how vulnerable we are as individuals to that. So it's important to talk about us. So I've seen this in company turnaround where things get difficult and all the financial rules get broken. The directors start paying the wrong people, paying themselves, paying goodness knows what else. And obviously taking cash. And I run a business. I run several businesses. One of which takes cash, and I absolutely religiously put that cash, even if it's £5, Nick, through the business, because I know that if I've seen it happen so many times. If I step out of line, I'm equally vulnerable to that. And what's next? I'm so shocked. I'm so shocked with myself, even to contemplate that, let alone do it. And if I did it, it's a bit like smoking. I used to smoke, and I'd be so shocked with myself, and if I started smoking again. I think that's quite encouraging. Oddly enough, I've sort of encouraged. I think this discussion's encouraged me slightly.
Oh, I think we're amazing people, and I think the old British and English ways are still in many of us.
Yeah,
we just don't display them anymore because there's no benefits in displaying them. But I think if we can change the environment we're living in, those natural traits and those English and British traits will come to the fore again. And I think we want them to come to the fore again. We haven't forgotten them. We just don't use them because there's no benefit in using them. I think we're a country waiting to be saved.
Yeah. Well, let's make that happen, Nick. Let's lead that. And I hope people take some encouragement from this discussion somehow.
I do as well.
And let's live it. Let's do it. Yeah. Nick, it's a real pleasure, my friend, to speak to you again. I find this encouraging. And you're right. My background is uncompromising.
Yeah.
Important. I think it's important we stay that focused and true to ourselves, and to look after ourselves, and because I think we are equally vulnerable to being bent out of shape ourselves as well.
Exactly. You prioritize yourself, your family, your community, your nation in that order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that is actually one of the mantras that I love about Reform UK as well.
Yeah.
But anyway, good to see you, my friend.
And you. Let's catch up again soon.
Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.